Welcome to the VC3 News Update. I am Shanette Hackshaw with the top news stories. Pro tempore President of CELAC and Prime Minister of this country, Dr. Rav Gonsalves, has hailed as historic the U.S. $100 million financing declaration, which was agreed to at the end of the EU CELAC summit, whilst standing with the President of the European Council, Charles Michel, President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and Alberto Angel Fernandez, the President of Argentina. Prime Minister Gonsalves thanked the heads of governments of the European Union and CELAC for their involvement in the historic summit. He added that the relationship between the European Union and CELAC is now stronger.
First of all, I want to thank the European Union, the European Commission, Charles, and all the heads of government of the European Union and of CELAC for being involved in what will, I think, turn out to be a historic gathering. The relationship between CELAC and the European Union is stronger today than it was yesterday or the day before yesterday as a consequence of this agreement. It's a wide-ranging agreement of 41 paragraphs touching and concerning all the major contemporary issues which concern us, both regions.
Gonsalves added that each civilization must come to terms with the remaking of Latin America and the Caribbean region, and that a relationship must be built by these states and the European Union.
Europe really remade the Caribbean, and Latin America remade itself. And each region, each of their respective civilizations has to come to terms with the process of this remaking and the consequences of this remaking. And what we have to seek to build is not only a relationship between states, but a relationship between civilizations.
The summit between the EU and CELAC was the first in 8 years and paid special attention to issues that are affecting small island developing states in the Caribbean and Latin America. Gonsalves went on to say that while there were some disagreements, the EU-CELAC summit was able to come to an agreement on contemporary matters and matters with a historical context.
Not everybody got the language which they wanted. You would expect that there would be disagreements, and it was hard going to get the declaration, but we have arrived at this particular point. Issues touching and concerning climate change, the financing of climate change, the reform of the international financial architecture, inclusive, sustainable development, some matters which have arisen out of history for which there are contemporary manifestations of historical legacies, like, for instance, slavery and the slave trade, issues on Ukraine, on other conflicts, on the terrible embargo against Cuba, the question of involvement of the private sector in the development of Latin America, the Caribbean, and Europe, the issues of international human rights and good governance and multilateralism, and the defense of international law, defense and promotion of international law, fundamental precepts of the Charter of the United Nations made flesh.
The two-day EU-CELAC summit, which is the third of its kind, brought European Union leaders and leaders from the Community of Latin America and Caribbean States, CELAC, together in Brussels. It concluded yesterday. The summit was an opportunity to further strengthen the EU-CELAC partnership, discuss working together to achieve fair, green and digital transitions, and to demonstrate a shared commitment to upholding the rules-based international order. Following a formal handing over ceremony on July 21, the Honorable Minister of Finance and Council Member for St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Camilla Gonsalves, will take over as Chairman of the Monetary Council of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, the ECCB. The Governor's report on money and credit conditions in the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, the ECCU, will be presented to the Council during its 105th meeting, which will follow the handing over ceremony. Following the meeting, the new chair, Camilla Gonsalves, will conduct a press conference where he will give the communique and take questions from media with other council members. Philip J. Pear, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, is the current chair and will be succeeded by Minister Gonsalves. The 8 members for finance of the Eastern Caribbean Currency Bank member nations make up the Monetary Council, the highest decision-making body of the ECCB. Each year, the 8 ECCB members, Anguilla, Antigua and Barbuda, the Commonwealth of Dominica, Grenada, Montserrat, St. Christopher and Nevis, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines rotate in alphabetical order to serve as the Council's chairman. And finally, in our local news update for today, at Exercise Trade Winds 2023, the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force and the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Coast Guard Service are each represented by a 14-member delegation. Exercise Trade Winds, which will go through July 27 in Guyana, began last week. And Will Williams, the Assistant Commissioner of Police, is in charge of the Vincentian delegation. The combined military exercise known as Exercise Trade Winds is sponsored by the United States Southern Command, or US SOUTHCOM. It has been carried out in conjunction with partner nations to improve the ability of defense forces and constabularies to work together to combat transnational criminal organizations, carry out humanitarian aid and disaster relief operations, build trust in relations, and raise awareness of human rights. Participating nations will exchange information and skills in order to strengthen security responses during the Trade Winds exercise. Those are our local news stories. When we return on Channel 114, we'll have regional and international news, to be followed by the VC3 Sports Updates.